It's been 1 month since the International Court of Justice ordered Israel to prevent acts of genocide. But its relentless assault on Gaza continues. Amidst the chaos, UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency, stands as a beacon of hope for millions, but it's facing attack on its work from Israel's military and propaganda machine, as well as reckless funding cuts from countries such as Germany, Italy, the US, and the UK. I'm here in the European Parliament today in Strasbourg to discuss the dire situation facing Palestinians and how we can organise to fight back. Joining me online is lawyer and human rights defender Ahmed Abofoul from Palestinian NGO Al-Haq. Hello, Ahmed.
Hi, thank you for having me, Karen.
Hey. So first question, Ahmed. The deadline for Israel to submit its evidence to the ICJ has now lapsed. How did they respond to the order to prevent genocide, and what are the legal implications of failing to comply with this order?
Sure. As you rightly pointed out, the court ordered on the 26th of January that Israel is plausibly committing genocide in the Gaza Strip, and the court ordered the following. First, that Israel has to prevent the commission of the genocidal acts, which the court listed, and has to second, to prevent and punish public incitement to genocide. Third, that Israel has to ensure that aid and services reach the Palestinian population in need in the Gaza Strip. And fourth, that Israel has to submit a report back to the ICJ after 1 month on how it complied with these measures. Now, as you rightly pointed out, we're a month later, and it is clear that Israel has not complied with this decision. Israel has continued its genocidal military campaign on the Gaza Strip with intense bombardment and attacks from air, land, sea, resulting in the killing of over 3,524 Palestinians. This is only since the court order, so in 1 month, and injured over 5,266 others, including of course, the ongoing mass displacement of the vast majority of the Palestinian population and destruction of most of residential units in the Gaza Strip. Of course, also Israel officials have further continued to show their intent to commit genocide, including announcing their plans to conduct a ground invasion of Rafah, where over 1.5 million Palestinians are displaced and have nowhere to go, and there is nowhere safe there. As for the delivery of humanitarian aid, Israel has declined to allow it since the court ruling. Israel escalated its delegitimization campaign against UNRWA, and regrettably and shamefully, to be honest, a number of states, including European states, followed such unsubstantiated allegations without even reviewing or receiving any evidence of such allegations, and cut funds from UNRWA at the time where the very existence of the Palestinian people is being threatened. Meanwhile, Israel continues to deliberately attack hospitals, punishing also the health sector, and pushing it out of service while using starvation as a method and a weapon of war. Palestinians at the moment are eating grass, are eating animal feed, especially in the northern part of Gaza. It has been reported that several children lost their lives. They died as a result of dehydration and starvation. Of course, the reporting to the ICJ is confidential, so we're not aware what Israel is reporting, but one can expect that Israel will try to prove to the court that it complied with the order, though one finds it very hard to imagine how Israel will do that, especially that it's abundantly clear that Israel is not complying with the order. But what is important here, if you allow me, is that South Africa will have to review that reporting. So the reporting, after being submitted to the court, will be sent to South Africa for review and response. And I think this is quite important, although South Africa's response will also be confidential, but one can expect that it will also try to refute what Israel has said. And based on that, it is conceivable and it's expected that South Africa may also come back to the court and request new provisional measures or modify the provisional measures that it had already asked, which may be the new provisional measures, may be more specific and precise than those broadly worded provisional measures that the court has ordered 1 month ago. As for enforcement of these decisions, the ICJ is as a court of law. It's not for it to enforce its decisions. It's for the international community, including the United Nations Security Council, although there is the U.S. complicit and shameful veto, but also for individual states, including European Union states that could influence the Israeli regime to stop its crimes and to allow humanitarian aid. So there is a positive obligation on European Union states to do everything in their power to compel Israel to comply with the ICJ, with the International Court of Justice provisional measures order. Unfortunately, until this very moment, the behavior of European states seem to be only complicit and even supporting Israel's genocide. And therefore, in my view, history will not be kind to European leaders who are complicit in this genocide and continue to fail to prevent it from happening.
Okay, thank you, Ahmed. In the meantime, we've also had, we've had our left MEP, Marc Botenga, just coming in for plenary. Hi, Marc, how are you?
Good, yourself?
I'm fine, thank you. So we were just speaking with Ahmed there about how Israel has responded to the ICJ's judgment. How has the judgment been received by the European Union?
Well, I think if you look at, and Ahmed just mentioned it, if you look at the reactions by European countries, by some European countries at least, it's been absolutely shameful. Because in theory, right, you'd have the International Court of Justice saying, listen, there's this plausible risk of genocide. And under the Genocide Convention, countries part to that convention would then be obliged to take all measures possible to prevent that from happening. And so the very first thing you'd be thinking of would be like an arms embargo. Be saying, if there's something you can do to stop the potential genocide, that be to stop arms going to Israel. That has not happened. Some countries individually, under pressure from their population, from demonstrations, from trade unions, have suspended arms licenses, and that's very important, but it's broadly not enough. And secondly, what was very clear in the judgment of the ICJ is that all humanitarian aid needs to go, needs to be allowed into the area. Israel has done the opposite. Israel has launched a full-scale attack also on UNRWA. Yesterday, Commissioner Lenarčič said very clearly they had received no proof of the allegations of Israel against UNRWA, and yet, even without proof, and even with UNRWA having, fired terminated the contracts of these employees that have been accused, even then, a number of European countries entered basically the Israeli narrative of saying, we're going to suspend funding, or we're not going to, pay the next amount of money that we're supposed to pay to UNRWA. So basically, the reaction of the European Union and of European countries broadly, some exceptions, has not been one of, okay, there's a court order, there's a court judgment, we're gonna implement this.
And something that actually both of you, and this is a question now for you, Ahmed, both of you have touched upon is the judgment itself and the implications and the responsibilities that member states have to respect and comply. Ahmed, as an international lawyer, maybe you can talk us through what some of the legal avenues that might be available to kind of hold the European Union to account to its obligations here.
Of course, in any functional democracy, the people should be able to hold their governments to account, and that's what we witnessed in the past months. We saw, for example, court proceedings in the Netherlands against the Dutch government for providing F-35 fighter jets to Israel, and the court ruling was clear that there is high risk that Israel is committing international crimes, and therefore the Dutch government should stop exporting these parts of 35 fighter jets to Israel. So here is an example after that ruling where a proceeding in one of the member states of the European Union decided that the government should stop. The thing with international courts orders, that the enforcement of those orders is not for the court itself, it's for the international community and the member states. So the European Union states, as my colleague has, as your guest has also touched upon, are obliged to make sure that this order is being implemented. So the bare minimum they could say at first is to stop exporting weapons to Israel because, to be honest with you, Palestinian children are being torn apart every day on our TV screen by European money, by European weapons. And therefore, European leaders have blood of Palestinian children all over their hands. So I think that's what we will continue to see in the future is more efforts by the civil society and by people challenging their governments, including before courts in the individual member states. It's important also to mention, if you allow me, that the people of Europe are against this genocide. I live here and I see it, and there seems to be a huge disconnect between what the people want and what the governments are doing. And that's why I mentioned that before, and I say it again. We all owe Gaza a lot. It's showing us what's wrong with this war. It's putting all of these liberal democracies to test, and it shows us the huge gap between what people want and what governments are doing. And if there is a moment in history similar to that one, is the last phase in South Africa's apartheid, where governments, including European governments, were the late comers. It was people who mobilized on the ground. So it's really heartwarming to see European people all over Europe demonstrating in thousands in the streets, demanding to end this genocide. And it resonates very well to what used to happen when apartheid South Africa was there. One piece of information I conclude with, until this very moment, did you know that most of European governments are not party to the Apartheid Convention? So until this very moment, they didn't even join the Apartheid Convention. They refused to denounce South Africa apartheid. It was their citizens that compelled them to do so, and we have faith in the European people and European governments and officials will be doomed by history as complicit and as guilty of that genocide committed against the Palestinians in Gaza.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you say there's a disconnect, it's totally true. It's an understatement. Even it seems to be two completely different conversations happening. But I just want to go back to stopping arms exports. This is something that the left in the European Parliament has been calling for. And we have a whole set of demands. Maybe you could talk us through what these key demands are and what the response has been so far.
Well, I mean, the key demands, obviously, the first key demand would be a ceasefire. We've been calling for a ceasefire, an immediate ceasefire, an unconditional ceasefire, to make the killing stop. And that is just a basic demand. It's very simple, very straightforward demand, because what's going on is a war against children, against women. It's a genocidal practice that we see live streamed on unfortunately not all over the media, but on social media. We see it. So, the first immediate demand is a ceasefire, make it stop. A second demand, indeed, has been in relation to arms exports. And we didn't need the ICJ judgment for this because it's important that, in theory, even the rules that the European countries, in the framework of the common foreign and security policy, imposed upon themselves would require a ban on all arms exports to Israel, because they speak about, there's a decision that says if there's a risk of violations of human rights, we shouldn't export weapons. Now, I don't think that anyone in their mind could today argue that there's not a risk of human rights violations in Gaza with the weapons that are going to Israel. So, the ICJ just reinforced that message and gave it international legal status and everything you want. But that has been a second demand, which has been really fundamental. I think a third demand, which is important, regards the association agreement. It's an amendment that our members have tabled time and again. Why? Because the European Union today has this specific, special relationship with Israel on the basis of a partnership agreement, which gives Israel massive trade benefits. So it means that, for example, a lot of produce from Israel can enter the EU market without tariffs or almost no tariffs. And so this association agreement also requires respect for human rights. The Article 2 of that agreement says Israel should respect human rights. I mean, both parties should. Now, once again, you cannot claim today that Israel is doing so. And so suspending this agreement, if not canceling it altogether, would be very basic, very straightforward demands, which we have time and again made. And what we have seen here, unfortunately, in this parliament, is that there's a double standards. When it's about Ukraine, they will all rise, they will all stand for Ukraine, defend the sovereignty of Ukraine, send weapons even to Ukraine, sanction Russia, 13 packages of sanctions against Russia. When it's about Israel, well, you know, if you're lucky if you get a critical view expressed in parliament. And of course, we bring that view. And over time, and I'm very thankful for that, thanks to the pressure, thanks to the mobilization of the people, ever more members of parliament from different groups have spoken up, have spoken out, have seen what's going on, and have been pushed to take a more critical stance towards Israel. But there's no action. And there's, I mean, it's incredible. The European Parliament, right? It adopts resolutions to condemn all countries of the world, every single plenary, like the most random countries sometimes. But it has not condemned Israel. It has not called for an immediate ceasefire. So you cannot imagine that. I mean, it really shows how basically the entire rhetoric about European foreign policy being about democracy, human rights, it's just rhetoric. It's just, it's theory, it's theater. Mm-hmm. And so for us, we need to keep pointing this out, saying, you know, you're supporting, you have supported for decades a colonial project, not just an occupational project, but a colonial project of ethnic cleansing, not just in Gaza, but throughout Palestine. You see it in Jerusalem, you see it in the West Bank. You have done nothing to impede it. And today you see genocide happening in front of your eyes, and you're still not acting. You still cannot even vote a resolution, you know, a non-binding parliamentary resolution for an immediate ceasefire. So that is an absolute scandal today. And indeed, the world will remember this.
So we actually don't have very much time left. So I just kind of like to ask you both one short question each. Ahmed, Al-Haq is, it seeks to, you know, defend international law and document human rights violations. What are the main challenges that you've faced in recent context, and how do you think this has changed over the past few years?
Yeah, of course. In relation to Gaza, we had to announce for the first time in our history, and we were established in 1979. We're the oldest human rights organization, not only in Palestine, but in the whole region. We had to announce for the first time that we're unable to cover the situation in the Gaza Strip properly because our staff lost their homes. They had to flee to the south. They lost family members, including myself, losing family members. And the choice we had to make is between survival or documenting what we can. And they continue to do that. You know, we continue to do that with other human rights organizations on the ground, but it's becoming extremely difficult. And if history has taught us something, is that in such situations, when there is no human rights defenders to document the atrocities that are being committed, this often encourages and emboldens the perpetrators to commit more crimes. And we saw this by Israeli soldiers bragging and filming their own violations because they feel untouchable. And unfortunately, it's Israel's allies, including the European Union, that ensure that Israel's enjoy impunity. And if you allow me very briefly, I totally agree with Marc. We didn't need the ICJ to tell us that the EU is complicit. It's been complicit for decades. The EU, for example, says settlements in the West Bank are illegal, but continues to import their goods, continues to finance these settlements. The European Union says it supports, quote-unquote, two-state solution, but it only recognizes one. The member states only recognizes one. So the hypocrisy, the double standards, the selectivity is very shameful, and it will be remembered in history, but we will never be under the illusion that this is representative of what the European people want, because we see that in the street. The street speaks for itself, and the position of the governments is quite shameful and is not representative of the will of the people.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, this is a question that I wanted to ask you, Marc. Obviously, yeah, we're seeing this disconnect between people and politics, and in Belgium, it's one of the EU member states that's considered more sympathetic to the Palestinian cause than other states. We've seen vigils, we've seen every night, we've seen mass mobilizations. How do you think these movements have influenced political discourse?
Oh, massively. The Belgian government position would not have been the same had it not been for those movements. Let's be very clear. It's not like there's some spontaneous reaction from the Belgian government saying what it's saying. Every statement, every action on behalf of the Belgian government is due to the pressure that's coming from the people in the streets, from the organizations, from the very strong Palestinian solidarity movement in Belgium. So it's absolutely fundamental. And you can see throughout Europe, the countries that have taken a slightly better stance, because I don't think any country has taken a good stance, but a slightly better stance, has been under pressure of their people. So it shows we can change things, and it's really a signal of hope. We need to continue. We need to impose not just the ceasefire, but a just solution. And which is not just, it's not about being on one side or the other. It's being on the side of international law, or being on the side of human rights, being on the side of the rights, the fundamental rights of a people that have been denied to the Palestinian people for decades now.
Absolutely. I just want to say thank you to you both. Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you, Marc, for joining me. I'm going to let you guys go back and do your important work. And to our viewers, thank you for watching. You can stay up to date on this issue and all the left's work around it by following us on social media and checking out our website at left.eu. Thank you.